All right. IAS is a business consulting firm that really helps small business owners navigate the storm that is their business. So running a business can be very chaotic. There's a lot of moving parts. We specialize in offering a fractional COO service that allows our clients to develop systems and process around how their business operates. We specialize in two unique areas of the COO space, which is process optimization. So how do you deliver whatever experience you deliver to your clients, and management training. How do you get your people to be able to deliver those experiences?
Awesome. So I wanted to talk to you because you've got some expertise here with really working with companies and this idea of creating a culture. So I feel like right now, especially, and I'm just as guilty of it, there's a lot of talks and seminars on creating a culture of X or Y. Last month, I did a talk with another woman, Minjet, and we talked about creating a culture of retention. I run a workshop on creating a culture of growth and positivity. But I think we almost need to take a step back and really go back to what is a culture? How would you define it?
Absolutely. I think, to your point, culture is a misused term, right? Like, because sometimes people, when they say culture, like when you say retention, you're actually saying, I want a culture of trust, right? That's a value statement. And that's kind of where you need to go, is really what is culture, right? Like for me, it's community, right? Like I associate culture with community, and community means a feeling of a place where people have shared beliefs and values, have shared understanding of where we're trying to go and what we're trying to achieve and who we help, right? Like it's those shared values, beliefs, the feeling that you're a part of something bigger than just your task, right? That's really what culture is in my book. To say like it's one thing, that's impossible, right? It's this amalgamation of things.
Yeah. And I would agree with that. I feel like culture is really the environment, taken kind of those other buzzwords that we hear, like our core values, our mission statement, our visions, our goals. And if you were to throw those into a pot, all right, what's the environment that we have created that encompasses all of those things and how they work together?
Absolutely. I mean, yeah. So when I work with my clients, I actually call this the internal client experience. So for marketers out there, we always talk about the client experience, but your employees and the people that are a part of your organization, your supporters, if it's a nonprofit, it may be board members or donors. Those are your internal clients. Some of them might also still be your external clients, but what's that internal client experience? That's your culture, right? Like the culture is how you're delivering on that experience and why you're delivering on it. So
yeah. And I think that you've already kind of stated it, is that it all starts with trust. So I know when I go in and I teach, whether I'm trying to create a culture of X, Y, or Z based on whatever your value system is, it starts with trust. And I teach that using the trust equation and how do you measure it. And I take more of a positive psychology approach to it. But I'm curious on what kind of approaches you take when you come into a company.
I mean, so one of the things that's unique, like about what I try to do and what I encourage others to do is that, I come in, so I adopted a mindset years ago when I first became an assistant director of the first summer camp I worked at full time, which was that I have to give trust before I'm going to get it. So I come in and I usually make outward statements of like, I trust everyone here, right? So it's similar to your philosophy, but I'm giving it out. I don't expect it because I have to actually earn the other people's trust, right? So when I walk into a company, I trust that everybody's in the right place for them. I trust that they know how to do their tasks. They might not know how to do their task as it connects to other people's tasks, or they might not know how to do the higher level function of like, how does it work with a person below them, or how do they manage the human behavioral side of things? But I trust that they're the right person for the job. And because of that, I think I get a lot of success in being able to percolate those higher level skills out of people. So that's kind of how I usually go about it. It's very informal. It's conversational in terms of how it actually looks and feels. I ask a lot of questions. I listen. I want to hear their stories. versus what do they do?
And I feel like, really going in and approaching it from a leadership perspective on, as a leader, I need to trust them first is so important. And I feel like sometimes that gets missed. And I think the most toxic thing to any work environment is having those micromanagers. Because I feel like micromanager, why so many people don't like being micromanaged is because I think it just spews, you don't trust me.
Yeah, so it's funny you brought up micromanagement. I had saw a riff on LinkedIn, I think the other day on this topic, and I was like, well, I think everybody's getting confused. It doesn't mean there's macro management, but really we all need to have active management, right? Active management is this trust that you have for your people, and you're giving them the space to ask questions, to fail, right? You have to give people space to fail. You have to give space for them to use you as a resource versus being the one that's dictating how exactly to do the thing that you want them to do. But going back, I don't know about you, but one of the biggest things I encounter with clients early on is they expect people to trust them. First, they need, and it's getting them to switch that philosophy is the huge winning point. That's my first thing is no, reverse your thinking. So when you hire someone, you just invested trust in them. Don't expect them to earn anything at this point. I don't know if you encounter that.
I
with
do.
Your clients.
And I approach it as, being open and honest, and start with something small in that, when you're walking down the hall and it's like, hey, Doogie, how's you going? How's it going? How's your day? Yeah. And you just good, fine. And you keep moving. And you could have had the worst morning ever. And I encourage my managers, hey, if you're having one of those days and they go hey, how are you? Go you know what? Not so great today. Not to complain, but to be honest, you know what? Today's a rough morning. I had a fight with my kid before they ran out the door. I spilled coffee on my slacks and had to change. I was running late. I'm really just kind of discombobulated right now. If you need anything, come to me in an hour. I need an hour to get settled. And I think that also helps with managing expectations, because now as an employee to that manager, I know in the next hour is not the time to bring this crisis or, to ask for that time off. I know that I can wait to find a better time to present that. And that also opens it up that as the managers start to be more open and honest about, their good days and their bad days, their employees also then in turn have no problem saying, hey, you know what? I'm really distracted today. And the manager can know I'm not going to get the best productivity. This is not the day to throw maybe this job on them or to critique something today. That can wait till tomorrow. And we can kind of manage each other better and create a just a better environment, one that's more empathetic to what's going on now.
I mean, you hit the beautiful word there with empathetic, right? It's imperative. I mean, and the flip side of that though is the managers, and this is something I do regularly with my training, is when you hear the words fine, good, I know, I don't know, there's always something else. So I always go, what does that look like? Tell me how that actually feels. As a manager, you have to have that back pocket second question ready. You're going to ask them how their day goes. They're probably not going to explain anything to you. They're going to say good, fine, blah, blah, blah. Their body language is going to tell you clearly something's not fine, something's not good, or will tell you something's fine, something's good. Either way, ask what's fine, what's good, and those conversations, I'm actively teaching a company right now this, and since they've started to put that into the repertoire, because I'm teaching 2 levels of management, I'm teaching the executive team and their middle management team. And since they've done that, their general communication has increased. Right? Their ability to work through problems has increased because they're actually actively curious with each other. And now they understand some of those maybe intentions that go into things. They also understand some of oh, this is the reason this person's off today. Yeah, I would be upset too. It's those little that extra questioning is a game changer.
And I think it comes back to we're people. So I know there's been a lot of discussions with like, managing your culture, managing your people in this pandemic, and we've gone to this hybrid. And I think that really all that's happened is that managers and leaders have now finally had to look at their human assets as not just assets, but real people. How many Zoom calls are you on and a toddler walks in, or a dog is barking, or, a spouse
Yeah.
walks in, and you realize like we're people, we have things. And I feel like, there's so much culture talk right now because people are starting to link that your culture has to have a certain level of empathy, and that we are people, and that there's a people aspect to this organization. And it's how do we manage that?
Yeah. I mean, you can't, there's nothing else to say to that except for you're right. Like,
Yeah.
and it's being intentional though about that, right? Like I think a lot of people right now, when it comes to culture, are looking at I mean, if you remember like 10 years ago when everybody was trying to be a startup and they put a ping pong table in or something like that, right? The now modern thing is that everybody works from home or everybody has flex schedules, right? These are elements of culture, right? These are part of it. There may be ways to indicate culture, right? Like that these things are not acceptable within our community, these things, but they aren't by themselves indicative of culture. And I think that's something, one of the things owners and executive team managers, senior level managers misconceive is like, these are aspects of it, just like your rules and policies are aspects of how you indicate culture, your expectations on communication, what is the highest, most important value in your company. Those are all the intentions and like, the things behind that make up that culture.
So what
Not
would you
just,
start with? So like, would you start if you were working with a company that's like, okay, how do we want to come across? What kind of environment do we want to create? Do they start with their mission? Do they start with their goals? Do they start with their core values? What would you have them really kind of define first?
the problem they solve.
Nice.
Yeah, so it's all starts with that. What problem do you solve for your different client types? So, and a lot of the times it starts very surface, right? If you sell a widget that provides light, we create light. But I'm like, all right, let's go deeper. What does that light allow people to do? It allows them to see in the dark. It allows them to read at night. Allows them to tuck their kids in at night. All right, let's get to the real value you're bringing people. So that's the first thing. And the same thing for any employee, right? You're solving problems for them. You're providing them with the resources to have family time. You're providing them with the opportunity. In exchange for providing them with that resource, they're providing you with the ability to gain resources to do the same things. So I start really heavily by defining that problem. From that problem, we can then create a vision or a mission statement, whichever is appropriate, or both. Then core values. How do you live those core values? What does it actually look like? How is it lived out in each different position? So it's like a progressive work your way down the pyramid. So you get to this really wide base, which is how are your clients, the people that you provided whatever widget for, are out there in the world living your values, living your mission, living it, because they're the end user.
Yeah. And then how do you communicate that and really kind of develop this culture internally? Does it start with the hiring process, or like maybe one of the things that I've seen, and when I come in, is usually a company is acquired by another and they already have this culture over here, but employees are used to this over here. So how can you, when dealing with those kinds of hurdles, whether it's starting up or being acquired by another company, really communicate out those values, that culture, and blend it into everybody and everything that you do?
Well, it's a little different. Like if your culture change is one thing, right? Because that's what's going on in that company. You have culture change going on, and probably some cultural adaptation going on there in that scenario. But then there's also like, all right, I own my own company. I'm doing it. I want to be intentional. I want to create a culture, right? Slightly two different processes because of two different situations. So I think first acknowledging that. I'll speak to yours first. The first thing that I do, if I would hope that the acquiring body understands that that's going to be a limitation and problem with their purchase, right? If you're acquiring a company, knowing that that's going to affect them and knowing what you actually acquired that company for. Did you acquire it for the people? Did you acquire it for the technology? What did you actually want? The reason you acquired that piece, and then being very honest with them, like, this is what it is. So like, even if this happens a lot where somebody will acquire a company and then downsize that actual department because they didn't want everything. And that does mean people are losing their job, but like a lot of how people usually walk into that, they're very ambiguous. They don't tell people, or they're very blunt and it happens day one.
Yeah.
One of those two things occurs. And it's like, listen, we're going through an evaluation process. We do intend on downsizing these areas. Some of you we would like to retain and put into other places. Like coming in and saying that on day one, or even as part of the outgoing owners, letting your people know. Now people can plan. It's still not an ideal situation. They can plan and they can make a choice. Do I want to stay and be a part of this? Do I not want to be a part of this change? So there's that whole piece, which just sets the groundwork. And then you can get into identifying the elements of culture that the new management team needs to come in. And I would say if I was that new management team, listen first. There might be something that works really well with your culture, but you have to understand these people's values and beliefs first, and then ask questions to hopefully lead them. Leading questions are going to be great here towards your ideology and thinking pattern.
Yeah.
And some things are just going to be policy changes. Large company, bureaucracy, new policies. You have to live with those and just say yes or no. That's the choice that people sitting in the seat have to make.
Yeah. And I think it's important to do the very first thing that you said is that, I've worked for companies that have been acquired and management comes in and it's like, they don't trust me. And it's like, no, I've been working this job for years and I'm a good employee. You just came in. Like, I don't trust you.
Yeah.
And I think even in that regard, it really comes back to that. And it comes back to the communication. Like you said, I'm one of those people, be upfront and open and honest with me from day one. Like, what's going on here? I feel like that's something that really kind of starts to create more of that toxic environment is when you get the gossip train going around. And I think it's so much better that after you've built that trust, that you open the lines of communication and trust that your employees will make the best decisions for them and the organization if we're all bought into it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's one of those things that we fear. It's like being honest and direct with somebody is very uncomfortable, right? Like when you tell somebody like, oh, you're not good at something, or you are like, I don't like the way you're doing that. But as soon as you do it, that's when progress actually starts to happen, right? Like that person can go through the emotional piece of that of like, oh my God, I just got negative feedback. That doesn't feel great. But now they can recover and start either making the change and agreeing with you, like, yes, I value what you just said and you're right to some degree, or no, you're not right, screw you, I'm leaving. Either way, a choice can be made that's now binary versus the one that's like left out there, which is what you encountered, which is how do they actually view me? Oh, do they view me? What do they think about me? I don't know. They're not telling me anything. They're telling me to do it this way, but they're not telling me why. Like, and I'm not asking the questions and I don't feel comfortable. And that's what ends up happening versus being clear. So that'd be the other thing. If you're in culture change, you have to be just very clear. And I'm going to say the word intentional again, but because that would have made that experience so much better for you.
Yeah.
It might have hurt at first if they told you negative things, but it still would have ended better, in the long run.
And me being a person that has growth mindset, I can take that criticism better, but I totally get it. I know people and I work with people on getting them from a fixed mindset to a growth, but you get people that are like in that fixed. And it's like, no, this is the way I've always done things and I hate change. Peace out. But like you said, that might sometimes be better, especially if you're bringing in a new
culture, a new team
process. Yeah. It may not be a good fit for them now, and they do need to move on and find something that is a better fit for them. So let's back it up even further.
Yeah.
How important is it to even like have this discussion about a culture? Like, I know so many people that like jump into a business and okay, I've created my mission statement and I've picked these core values and we put them up on the wall. and we know what our goal is. Like, and I feel like that's where it's left. Then we just get into the processes, and they skip that culture part. You know, how important is it to have a culture, and what problems have you seen for the companies that don't really like, that aren't intentional, as you would say?
Yeah. Okay. So the problems are easier. Like a lot of the companies that suffered, through COVID and through the Great Resignation, all of this, because of lack of a concrete culture, right? Like a lack of intentional culture. People are extremely loyal when they feel cared for, they feel safe, they feel that someone's actually acting in their interests. They have shared vision and interests with the people that are there, right? Most of these companies that were suffering never spent time thinking like that.
Mm-hmm.
Thus, they had problems. Thus, people are willing to jump for money very quickly. The business owners I talked to that were intentional, that did do that, had a lot less turnover. Sure, they still had people, right? People are going to choose to jump for money for better quality of life when it's out there, but far less. And it was a lot easier for them to fill those spots because their people were advocates. They were like, oh, I have a friend, I want her to come work here, or like all those types of things. They become advocates for you out there because they're like, this really is the greatest place I've ever worked.
Mm-hmm.
This is my community. These are the people I like hanging out with and spending time with. So now going to the first part of this, right, of how do you be intentional, or how do you take it from these words you put up on the wall and this thing you have in a handbook somewhere, maybe,
Yeah.
to actually a lived pieces. How often do you discuss it, right? What are the habits that the actual habits, the behaviors and actions that you associate with your culture, right? These are the questions to actually start asking that. Like, what does our culture actually look like? Is it people walking around the office asking people how their day is? Is that something that's important in your culture? Is it important that we have social time as a team? Is that important to your culture? Is it important that people know everybody's families, right? These are the cultural choices, and then become markers of behavior that we can start indicating and seeing how well we're living our values. But it starts by asking the question, like, what does it actually look like?
Yeah.
And asking that with regularity at all levels of your business. Like, there's formal ways and informal ways of doing that, but yeah.
Where do you see the biggest disconnect? Is it with like executive suite? Is it at like the executive and owner level? Is it more like middle managers? Where do you see the disconnect? Like when there is a breakdown and that being intentional and communicating it?
So, I mean, once you get past like in the really small teams, let's say sub 20, when you're putting in that early entry, that may be core of like 3 to 5 middle managers in a team of 20, you're going to see a slight disconnect usually between the executive team and the front of house, the direct line people, right? Like usually a slight difference. And that usually gets them coming out of their office and literally just asking the question, what do you think about working here? What's the best part? What's the worst part? What do you like? What do you like? Giving them FaceTime will usually solve that problem. But as you start to expand and you have different tiers and levels and you get up past 150, you start to see that same problem expand. And this is where that middle management investing becomes very important. Because if they start drifting, the more the middle drifts, the way further you are at the bottom. So you have to keep investing in those middle tiers as you grow, of really saying, what does our culture look like? How are you living it in your department? One of the things that I add, so I do an exercise with all of my middle managers where they write their job descriptions. But one of the sections that I add to their job description is, what does the company's mission or vision actually look like in your department? And then I ask them, like, what are those visual markers? Now, an owner could do that same exercise with their middle tier. And then the managers are like, okay, cool. I have to actually think about what it looks like, not just say, yeah, we do that, which is what happens a lot. So where do I see? I mean, it's at all levels. You see it everywhere, but that's kind of how to fix it. And it just drifts. The bigger a company gets, the more you're going to see it.
Yeah. But I do like that you picked up on like, because where I see it is that the front end supervisor manager level, sometimes like, I get promoted up to that. And we don't really go over the core values. It's just like, here's a promotion, you're a manager, put the manager hat on and make your team
Yeah.
run efficiently. And I feel like as the company grows, that's where a disconnect happens. And I see companies that do a lot of different things to help, they'll do engagement surveys, they'll maybe do a leadership training, but I like that exercise that you give them. And I actually recently heard another woman speak, and she really talked similarly about how are we connecting our employees and our managers' goals with the goals of the company? Like, why is it that we chose here to work? Like, it is our personal purpose, goals, missions connected or tied into the company that we work for in any way? Like, do we all feel the same mission on this is the problem we solve with our widget and we're excited about it because I have a personal goal that's tied into it?
I see how I'm making that impact in what I do. You also brought up a really good point that I think should be a part of every culture. Like, I don't try to tell people like, hey, you have to have this element, but this is one of those where it's like, you definitely should, which is future setting. Right? You brought it up, like with making sure that you're connecting the personal goal of each of your employees with the goals of the company. But it starts by actually saying, hey, Megan, I today, I just want to hear about where you see yourself, what you want to accomplish, what's your career path, not necessarily here at this company, but in life. Where do you want to be? Because it's our objective here to get you to where you want to be. If that's with us, great. If not, also great, but it's about you. And we're going to try to figure out how to make this experience be the best thing to get you there. Right? I don't know if you've ever had an experience like that where a boss actually sat you down and did that. But can you imagine how that would feel if they did?
Yeah. And honestly, I feel like that idea of future setting is so new. It's such a simple concept, but I have never worked for a company that has done that for me. You get the question in the interview on where do you see yourself in 5 years? And we all like kind of come up with something that sounds great for the interviewer.
Usually like here in this company as a senior manager or whatever it is,
exactly.
Which is not necessarily true.
No. But I do like that concept. And like I said, I just went to an event that had a bunch of HR leaders and they brought up this future setting. That was like the first time I heard it. And I'm just like, this really is an amazing tool. And I'm sure it's powerful. If my manager had come to me and been like, where do you see, like, what's your goal? What do you want to accomplish this year, next year? Like, what are you hoping
and then follow up with it.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I'll give you an example. So I used to do this in my previous business. And it was a summer camp, so I had a ton of seasonal employees. But one of the things I'd ask them is like, and they're young, so they're in college. Some are recent graduates. They're in that really like, I still have no idea what I want to do, even what I want to do next phase. And one of the things that I wanted to bring them value was connect them to people that can hopefully help them answer some of those questions. So I'd ask them like, where do you see yourself? What career path? And then I took business time. So one of our staff meetings, and they each had a one-on-one with somebody in their career path, which one was an amazing connection for them, right? For them to actually meet somebody. And two, they got questions answered by someone who they perceived was in their career path. And then for me, it was like, I got to show you the immense value I believe in each of you and how much I care, because I invested my own time talking to each of these people to set this up.
Yeah.
That's how I used my time, because they were out doing what I needed them to do. But I could use my time to do that for them. So it's like, you want to talk about culture and value. That's how I showed my values and culture.
I love that. And I think that's a nice little high note to end this on. So we are at our 30-minute mark. And I feel like you and I could talk like another hour on this.
Easily.
So, but I love that, the idea of future setting. And I think there's some good little takeaways for some people in this. And I'll point it out that this is going to be on the Facebook stream for a while. So if anyone has any questions, comments that you want to reach out to myself or Doogie, you can do that there. Doogie, how else can they reach out to you if they have any questions or we're looking to bring you in to help them with some of these things?
Yeah. So the best things are connect with me on LinkedIn. I love connecting with people on LinkedIn because it can give me more insights into you and you can get more insights into me. So please connect with me on LinkedIn. It's just Doogie Levine, pretty easy to find. The other thing is you can check on my website. It's ideasactionsuccess.com. And that's also my email. It's doogie@ideasactionsuccess.com.
All right, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for this today. We might have to like do this again. So I think there was a lot of really good info in this one.
I mean, we could do a part 2, 3, 4, 5 on this easily.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you again and have
Thank
a
you
good
for
rest
having
of
me.
your day. Yeah.
You too.
Bye.